Hello everyone and welcome to round 4 of the FIDE Grand Prix 2022. It's a Daniil Dubov versus Vincent Keymer. This is the return match. If you remember in round 1, it was a really crazy game. Vincent had a better position than Dubov, equalized, and then anything could have happened, but in the end the game ended in a draw. But now we have a clash in round 4, so let's check it out. There is quite a lot to enjoy. Dubov with the white pieces opens with e4 and Vincent goes for the Caro-Kann defense. He plays c6 with d4, d5 and now e5. Dubov not interested in trading pawns. He goes for the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann. Bishop to f5, knight to f3, and now that the bishop has been nicely developed, we close our setup with e6. We have bishop to e2 and now black will waste one more tempo to attack white's center. So c5, we have bishop to e3 defending the pawn, and now queen to b6, putting pressure on that b2 pawn. And if you don't know what you're doing, this could be a little bit scary as there is a lot of pressure on that center. Knight is coming to c6, your b2 pawn is hanging, but if you know what you're doing, you can just play knight to c3 and offer that b2 pawn. Now there's no way to actually trap black's queen, but that's not what white's trying to do. The idea is if you capture here, we're going to play queen b1, and now after we trade, let's say captures, the b7 pawn is hanging, and after b6, b6, we're going to play d captures on c5. After b captures, there's knight b5, threatening knight to c7 check to win the rook, so king d8, and now knight to d6. An excellent square for the knight. Also, we're blocking the bishop defending the c5 pawn, so we're ready to capture this, and black will just have to give up the knight for the bishop here. Captures, and now let's say knight to d7, we are defending the pawn. Now rook b7, and white will always have this a little extra time to keep on pushing for the sacrificed pawn. So not really something you want to do with black. So instead we have knight to c6, Keymer just continues developing, and now Dubov castles. But now it's perfectly fine to capture the b2 pawn. So queen captures on b2, now queen b1, we simply trade and castle queen side. There is no worry about the b7 pawn hanging, and the king will be very safe. So queen to e1, defending the knight because that also was hanging. C captures on d4, and now not knight captures on d4 because then bishop to b4 could be annoying. First bishop captures on d4. Now the knight is defended twice, so no point in going bishop to b4 right away. First we capture, knight captures, and now bishop to b4. We are threatening to pick up the knight here. So Dubov goes knight d to b5, threatening knight to c7 check, but also just defending the c3 knight. That's very important. Bishop to a5, guarding the c7 square, and now rook to b1. So giving up the c2 pawn as well. Queen captures on c2, and now rook to c1, attacking the queen. Queen has to move, and now we play knight to a4. You could also throw in a nice knight to d6 check, but first knight to a4, attacking the queen. We have bishop captures on e1. This is a queen trade also. Knight captures on b2, and now as the bishop is hanging, bishop to a5. And now Dubov takes this opportunity to play knight to d6 with check. We have king to e7, and now knight captures on b7. So he grabs the b7 pawn, but he's still down a pawn, and the bishop on a5 is hanging. So here we have bishop back to d8, and now knight captures on d8. We have king captures on d8 and rook f to d1. So Keymer is up a pawn, but he's very much behind in development. He still has to develop the rook, the knight, and this rook here. So he starts with rook to b8, makes sense. It's an open file. You develop it with tempo. The knight is hanging, but now knight to c4 as the d5 pawn is pinned. So you are bringing the knight to d6, and the black is helpless in preventing this, as he has a light square bishop, and the knight has quite a few jumps before reaching the d6 square. And if you try something like, let's say, knight e7, we're going to play knight e6, bishop to g6. It's a fine position, but maybe you're going to have a hard time bringing this rook into the game. So Vincent wants to play something different. He plays g5 first, as he knows knight is coming here, so he wants to play bishop to g6, but at least he will already have played g5, and then maybe you can start pushing. So here knight d6, attacking the bishop, bishop to g6, and now rook to d4, grabbing control of the fourth rank. Also rook to a4, going after the a7 pawn, will be a key move in many of the lines. So here we have knight to e7. Vincent continues development. Now even knight to f5 can be played, attacking the rook and the knight, so maybe you can force a trade there. And now simply g4, taking away the f5 square from the black knight, and now comes rook to b6. The idea is, well, black is actually okay in this position, but you have to find king to d7. And it's hard to understand king to d7. It's not like you can bring the rook into the game. I mean, you can play rook to d8, but then your king is just stuck on d7. The idea is that after something like bishop to b5 check, you just capture the bishop. And after knight captures, you now play knight to c6, and you continue playing this. You are up a pawn, and your position is perfectly fine, but of course it's not easy to find. If you play rook to a4, yes, we're putting pressure on this pawn here. Now we can play rook to b8. And now, of course, if you capture on a7, now you are attacking the knight twice. We're going to capture on e5. Knight captures on e5, and you can see that the black's pawn structure is really, really solid, and the black will have all the needed counterplay to counter white's outside pass pawn, and also just being down the exchange. So this is the way to go. However, Vincent played rook to b6, and it's not that it's a bad move. It's a bad move if Daniil has a winning move here. And there is one winning move here. It's the only winning move in the position. It's the one Vincent missed as he played this. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the move Vincent missed while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true Ruilopasian. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course bishop to b5. This is the move that wins. And now when you see it, of course you also believe it. So what can black do here, and what is white even doing? Well, to give you a quick tour, let's say we attack the bishop with a6. We're just gonna play rook to a4, and now there's really not all that much you can do. You're gonna lose this pawn, and of course if you capture the bishop, then rook a8 check, king d7, rook to a7 check, king to d8, and now rook c to c7, and that's it. There's really not all that much to try here. You can move the knight, rook to d7 checkmate, or something in those lines. So instead, after bishop to b5, Vincent just brings the rook back. We have rook back to b8, and now we have rook to a4. So again, the rook is coming to the 7th rank. So knight to c8, defending this pawn, hoping to prevent this somehow. But again, it's completely winning for white. There are a couple of ways you can win this. You could just play a passive rook to c5, but that's not fun. Daniil goes for the quickest way to win, and that is rook captures on c8. So a temporary exchange sacrifice, but it doesn't matter. Rook captures on c8. Now comes rook captures on a7. And how do you play here? Rook to d7 is already the threat of checkmate. You have to move the rook. So rook to c7, but now the other rook is falling. So rook to a8 check, king to e7. Now rook captures on h8, and now white is just up a full piece. Plus he has the outside passed a pawn. So f6 was played, trying to maybe overwork the knight here, or rather overwork the pawn, but just rook to c8. There's nothing for Vincent to do here. Rook to a7 was played, and now rook to c6, and it was in this position on move 32 that Vincent resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Once you move something, what do you even play? Let's say rook captures on a2. We can play rook c7 check, king f8, captures on f6, and you are getting checkmated very quickly here. All of the squares are covered. You have to go back with the rook, and then you're just out of moves. Really a fine game. Vincent did not make any big mistake other than that rook to b6 move, but like I said, king to d7 in this position, and he can play, but it's a move that why would anyone play this? It looks so unnatural, and if you believe that you can maybe bring the rook into the game, then okay, but this way an impossible move to find, it would seem. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Elena Calzolari, and I would like to thank Meadow for breaking into the room at the precise right moment, Daniel Silverberg, John Black, and Patrick Mulcair for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this spectacular event until it ends. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent start of your week.